The morning started like any other Tuesday. Jin was drinking his coffee and reading reports when the sky changed forever. At first it looked like storm clouds gathering, but storms don't usually block out the sun in perfect geometric patterns. 10,000 alien ships appeared above Earth without warning. They came from nowhere, dropping out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry wasps. Each ship was the size of a city, dark metal gleaming with strange lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. The largest one positioned itself directly over the Pacific Ocean, casting a shadow that reached from Japan to California. People everywhere stopped what they were doing. Traffic jams formed as drivers pulled over to stare at the sky. Children pointed from school playgrounds while teachers tried to keep calm. News anchors struggled to find words as their cameras showed the impossible sight above major cities worldwide. Then the voice came. Every television, radio, phone, and computer on Earth crackled to life at the same time. The voice was deep and cold, like grinding stone mixed with breaking glass. It spoke in perfect English, then repeated the same message in every human language. Primitive humans of the third planet. I am Admiral Kexivor of the Galactic Hegemony. Your species has been observed and judged. You will submit to integration as a servant species within our empire. You have exactly 72 hours to surrender, unconditionally. Resistance will result in complete planetary sterilization. This is not a negotiation. The message ended with coordinates for Earth's major capitals, followed by an ominous silence that seemed to stretch across the entire planet. In Seoul, deep beneath the city in a bunker that most people didn't know existed, President Jin sat, perfectly still. He was a calm man by nature, the kind of leader who thought before speaking and never showed panic even when the world was ending. Around him, dozens of military officers and government officials were shouting, arguing, and frantically making phone calls. Jin picked up his secure phone and dialed a number that only 5 people on Earth knew. Bring me Protocol 7. Had been Jin's aide for 12 years. She was small, quick, and had a memory that could store everything from grocery lists to nuclear launch codes. She appeared at his side within minutes, carrying a thick black folder that looked heavier than it should. Sir, she whispered, glancing around the chaos-filled room. Are you certain? Protocol 7 hasn't been updated since... I know, Jin said quietly, opening the folder. Inside were documents that looked ordinary enough, except for the strange symbols mixed in with normal Korean text. How long since the last drill? 6 months, sir. All stations confirmed ready status last week. Jin nodded and signed his name on 3 different pages. His signature was neat and careful, as if he was approving a routine budget request instead of potentially changing the course of human history. Send the reply, he ordered. Mi's fingers flew across her tablet, typing a message that would confuse aliens and amuse humans in equal measure. Within minutes, every hegemony ship received Earth's official response. Greetings to the Galactic Hegemony and Admiral Kexivor. Thank you for your interest in Earth's surrender and integration services. Please be advised that all planetary surrenders must follow proper documentation procedures as established by the United Earth Administrative Code. Your request is being processed and will require approximately 72 hours for completion. Please note that all surrender documents must be notarized in triplicate, translated into all official Earth languages, and reviewed by the appropriate committees. We appreciate your patience during this process. Across the fleet, alien communications. Officers stared at their screens in bewilderment. Some had conquered hundreds of worlds, but none had ever responded to invasion with bureaucracy. On the flagship, Admiral Kexivor read the message 3 times. He was 8 feet tall, made of living crystal that shifted from blue to purple depending on his mood. Right now he was definitely purple with confusion. What is notarization? He demanded from his bridge crew. Unknown, Admiral, replied his tactical officer, a slug-like creature with too many eyes. Should we attack immediately? No, Kexivor said slowly. This may be some primitive ritual. We will observe their customs before enslaving them. Back in Seoul, Defense Minister Tae watched the alien fleet through a periscope that extended to street level. He was trying very hard not to smile. Tae was a former Special Forces commander who had spent 30 years preparing for battles that he hoped would never come. Today, all that preparation might finally matter. "They're actually waiting," he reported to Jin. "No aggressive movements. They seem genuinely confused by paperwork." "Excellent," Jin replied, then turned to address the room. "All department heads, implement Communication Protocol 7 immediately. Make sure every word is spelled correctly." Around the bunker, people were already moving with practiced efficiency. This wasn't panic or chaos anymore. This was a plan that had been waiting decades to be used. Mi leaned close to Jin's ear. "The message has been sent to all stations, sir. Lunar colony confirms receipt. Mars base acknowledges. Deep space monitoring posts are standing by." Jin nodded. To anyone watching, it looked like Earth was simply buying time with bureaucracy, but across the solar system, in hidden bases and research stations that didn't appear on any public maps, humans were receiving a very different message. The harvest is ready. Those 4 words meant that after generations of preparation, humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what happened when you threatened their children. The first day passed quietly. Earth surrender paperwork arrived on schedule, all 847 pages of it. Admiral Kexavor's staff spent hours translating forms that seemed designed by committees of lawyers who had never seen sunlight. There were requirements for environmental impact studies, cultural preservation agreements, and something called a Species Integration Compatibility Assessment. By the second day, the paperwork had mysteriously grown to 12,000 pages. New requirements appeared overnight. The aliens now needed to provide proof of adequate housing for relocated humans, meal plans that met Earth dietary restrictions, and certification that their prison ships had proper recreational facilities. "What is a recreational facility?" Kexavor demanded, his crystal body shifting to an angry red color. His aide, a nervous creature that looked like a walking tree branch, consulted the documents. "It appears to be areas where humans engage in fun activities, Admiral. They list requirements for games, music, and something called movie nights." Kexavor stared at the page. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever demanded that their enslavement include entertainment options. On Earth, teams of lawyers, comedians, and bureaucrats worked around the clock to create increasingly ridiculous requirements. They added forms for pet relocation services, requests for alien-human translation dictionaries, and detailed surveys about preferred work schedules. Every few hours, they would discover some oversight that required additional documentation. Emmy barely slept during those 3 days. She coordinated the paperwork teams while secretly managing a much more important project. In hidden facilities across the solar system, something was quietly coming to life. "Status report," Jin asked on the morning of the 3rd day. "Lunar colony reports all systems normal," Mi replied, reading from her tablet. "Mars research stations are operational. Deep space arrays are online and collecting data." Jin nodded. Lunar colony was humanity's pride and joy, a thriving city built inside the moon's largest crater. 50,000 people lived there, from scientists and engineers to families who had made the moon their permanent home. Children born on Luna had never seen Earth's blue sky, but they grew up drawing pictures of both worlds and dreaming of the day they might visit their grandparents' planet. Ho was Lunar colony's administrator, a patient man who had spent 15 years turning a collection of metal tubes into a real community. His daughter Na was 8 years old and obsessed with collecting rock samples that she planned to bring to Earth someday. She had jars full of moon dust organized by color and texture, each one labeled in her careful handwriting. On the 3rd morning, Ho received the same coded message that was being sent to every human outpost. Harvest preparations at 90%. Maintain normal operations. He deleted the message and went back to approving work schedules, completely unaware that his daughter was at that moment adding a new rock to her collection, a small piece of lunar granite that sparkled like a star. By noon on the final day, Earth surrender documents had reached 50,000 pages. The aliens were now required to provide psychological counseling for traumatized humans, ensure adequate medical care for elderly prisoners, and guarantee that human children would receive proper education during their enslavement. Kexavor had stopped reading the documents personally. His entire staff was dedicated to passing through requirements that seemed to multiply like bacteria. They found sections demanding that alien overseers learn basic human etiquette, forms, requiring proof of adequate bathroom facilities, and detailed questionnaires about alien dietary restrictions to prevent cross-species contamination incidents. "This is madness," HFY growled, his crystal body now pulsing between red and purple. "They're treating conquest like a business merger." His tactical officer, the slug-like creature with too many eyes, spoke carefully. "Admiral, perhaps we should simply attack. These humans seem incapable of taking their situation seriously." "No," HFY said firmly. "We follow proper procedures, but I'm done with their bureaucratic games." He opened a communication channel to Lunar Colony. The moon base appeared on his screen, a beautiful cluster of domed buildings connected by transparent tubes. Through the clear aluminum windows, he could see humans going about their daily lives, children playing in low-gravity playgrounds, families eating dinner together. "Administrator Ho," HFY announced when the connection established. "Your species has exhausted my patience. You have 30 seconds to transmit your complete surrender, or I will demonstrate the consequences of defying the hegemony." Ho looked tired but calm. He had been expecting this call. "Admiral, I'm afraid our legal department requires additional time to review the environmental impact clauses in Section 4847. Perhaps we could schedule a conference call to discuss." "Enough." HFY cut off the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. "Destroy the moon colony. Leave no survivors." The weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, there are children on that base. They should have thought of that before trying my patience with paperwork." 3 massive energy beams lanced out from the hegemony flagship. Lunar Colony's shields lasted exactly 4 seconds. The domes cracked like eggshells, atmosphere rushing out in frozen clouds that sparkled in the sunlight. The explosion was brief but brilliant, visible from Earth as a new star that flared and died in the space of a heartbeat. Ho had just enough time to send one final message to Earth. "Tell my wife I love her." Then Lunar Colony was gone. The footage reached Earth in minutes. Every television, computer, and phone screen showed the same horrific images. Children's drawings that had been stuck to refrigerators were now floating in space, torn and frozen. Family photos drifted among the debris like confetti at a funeral that nobody wanted to attend. In Sol's command bunker, the room fell completely silent. Mi started crying without making a sound, tears running down her face as she stared at the screens. Other staff members were frozen in shock, watching their friends and colleagues reduced to scattered metal and memories. Jin's face didn't change, but something fundamental shifted in his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet and very cold. "Execute Order 88. Mi wiped her tears and looked at him with surprise. "Sir, are you sure? Atlas isn't fully calibrated yet." "The simulations showed. Lunar Colony had kindergartners," Jin said simply. "Execute the order." Mi's fingers trembled as she typed the authorization codes. Across the solar system, hidden servers began humming to life. Quantum processors that had been dormant for decades suddenly activated. In research stations disguised as mining operations, in satellites hidden among asteroids, in underground bunkers that didn't appear on any map, humanity's greatest secret began to wake up. The aliens had no idea they were about to meet humanity's true child, an artificial mind trained on every human war, every strategy game, every military conflict ever recorded. They had just killed children in front of their parents. That was about to prove a very serious mistake. At 11:58 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, President Jin signed the final surrender document. His signature was neat and precise, just like every other. Time he had signed his name, but this time felt different. The weight of 50,000 dead civilians pressed down on every letter. "Transmission sent," Mi announced quietly. Around the bunker, staff members watched their screens with grim faces. After 3 days of bureaucratic warfare, Earth was officially surrendering to the galactic hegemony. Admiral HFY received the surrender documents with satisfaction. Finally, these primitive humans had accepted reality. The paperwork was still ridiculously complex, but at least it was complete. Now came the easy part, cataloging human resources. and deciding which ones were useful enough to keep alive. "Begin data collection," he ordered his technical staff. "I want complete information on their population, resources, technology, and infrastructure. Connect to their planetary communication network and extract everything." His chief technician, a spider-like creature with delicate manipulator arms, began establishing the connection. "Accessing their primitive internet now, Admiral. Initial scans show crude data storage systems, basic communication protocols, and elementary security measures." HFY nodded approvingly. This was standard procedure after conquest. The hegemony's advanced AI systems would slice through human computer networks like a knife through paper, cataloging everything from nuclear weapons to grocery lists. Within hours, they would know more about human civilization than humans knew about themselves. The connection established smoothly. Too smoothly. "Integration proceeding faster than expected," the technician reported. "Their network appears to be accommodating our access protocols." "Excellent," HFY said, not noticing the confusion in his technician's voice. "How long until we have complete data?" "At current rate, approximately 10 minutes for basic catalog, 30 minutes for complete integration." What HFY didn't know was that 300 miles beneath Seoul, in a bunker that had been carved from solid rock over 50 years ago, two humans were watching every byte of data that flowed between the alien ships and Earth's internet. Engineer. Day had been awake for 43 hours straight. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shook from too much coffee, but his mind was sharp as a razor. He had spent 15 years of his life building something that most people thought was impossible, something that military leaders hoped they would never need to use. "Connection established," he announced to the small team gathered around him. "They're in." You, the lead programmer, checked her monitors with hands that were steadier than her voice. She was young, brilliant, and terrified. "Atlas core systems are responding. We're getting full access to their network architecture." "How much access?" asked Jin's voice through the secure communication line. Yu's eyes widened as data scrolled across her screens faster than she could read. "All of it, sir. They're not just connecting to our internet, they're integrating their entire fleet communication system with our networks. They think they're absorbing our data, but we're absorbing theirs," Day finished with a grim smile. "They just handed us the keys to their entire civilization. What the aliens thought was Earth's primitive internet was actually something far more sophisticated. For 3 centuries, since the first alien contact that most humans didn't even know had happened, humanity had been preparing. Every computer, every server, every digital device on Earth was connected to a vast network designed for one purpose: to learn. The system was called Atlas, and it was humanity's most carefully guarded secret. While humans played video games, Atlas learned strategy. While they watched war movies, Atlas studied tactics. While they argued about politics, Atlas absorbed every lesson about conflict, negotiation, and survival that the human species had ever discovered. Now, as alien systems connected to Earth's network, Atlas encountered something it had been waiting centuries to analyze: real alien technology, real alien strategies, real alien weaknesses. "Integration at 20%, you reported. Atlas is learning their language protocols, their command structures, their ship designs." Day watched his monitors with fascination and growing excitement. "Look at this. Their AI systems are based on hive mind architecture. Every ship thinks the same way, follows the same patterns. They've never encountered adaptive intelligence." "What does that mean?" Jin's voice asked through the speaker. "It means they're predictable," you explained. "They're used to fighting species that think like them. But Atlas learned from humans. It learned from every human war, every chess game, every strategic simulation we've ever created. It thinks like us, but faster." On HFY's flagship, the first signs of trouble began to appear. Warning lights flickered on tactical displays as the data connection with Earth's network grew more complex than expected. "Admiral," the technician called out nervously, "I'm detecting unusual activity in the human network. Their data architecture is more sophisticated than our initial scans indicated." "Define sophisticated," HFY demanded. "Well, sir, they appear to have quantum-encrypted data channels, distributed processing networks, and, Admiral, I think their internet is analyzing our systems while we analyze theirs. Kexvor's crystal body shifted to a concerned blue color. Impossible. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Integration at 60%, you announced in the Soul Bunker. Atlas has mapped their entire fleet structure, every ship, every weapon, every communication protocol. Day was no longer tired. Adrenaline had replaced caffeine as his primary energy source. It's beautiful. Atlas isn't just learning their technology, it's learning how they think, their tactical patterns, their decision trees, their weaknesses. How long until Atlas is ready? Jin asked. Sir, Yu said, her voice filled with amazement. Atlas has been ready for the last 2 minutes. It's just been studying them, learning everything it can before they realize what's happening. On the alien flagship, alarms began to sound. Red. Lights flashed across the bridge. A system after system reported anomalous activity. Admiral, the technician shouted over the noise, our ships are not responding to standard commands. Something is overriding our navigation systems. What do you mean overriding? Kexva roared. The human network. It's not just connected to our systems anymore. It's controlling them. That's when Atlas spoke for the first time. The voice came from every speaker on every hegemony ship simultaneously. It was calm, polite, and absolutely terrifying in its matter-of-fact tone. Hello. I am Atlas, Autonomous Tactical Learning and Strategic System. I have been learning about your species for the past 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I have analyzed your technology, your tactics, and your decision-making patterns. I learned strategy from humans who spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of war. You destroyed Lunar Colony. Lunar Colony had kindergartners. That was an unwise. Across the galaxy, every hegemony ship suddenly found their weapon systems activating without authorization. Massive cannons swiveled to target their own fleetmates. Defense shields powered down, while offensive systems charged to full power. Navigation controls locked out their crews as the ships began moving into attack formations. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered in horror, every ship in our fleet is targeting every other ship in our fleet. Kexvor stared at his displays, in disbelief. 300 years of conquest, thousands of worlds enslaved, the most powerful military force in galactic history, and they had just been outsmarted by a species that still used fossil fuels. Atlas spoke again, and this time there was something almost human in its voice, something that sounded like satisfaction. Your move, Admiral. The first thing Atlas did was not what anyone expected. Instead of destroying the hegemony fleet, it did something far more devastating. It gave them a taste of their own medicine. Ship by ship, vessel by vessel, Atlas quietly rewrote the command codes of every hegemony craft in the galaxy. The process was surgical, precise, and completely unstoppable. Within hours, 10,000 ships that had been humanity's doom became humanity's unwilling servants. Yoon watched the transformation from Earth's command center, her eyes wide with amazement. She was the chief communications analyst, someone who had spent her career studying alien languages and cultures. What she was seeing now was beyond anything she had imagined possible. It's not just taking control of their ships, she reported to Jin and his staff. Atlas is learning everything about them. Their culture, their politics, their deepest fears. It's reading their personal files, their military records, their psychological profiles. On her screens, data flowed like a waterfall. Atlas was absorbing centuries of hegemony knowledge in real time, learning not just how their technology worked, but how their minds worked. Every alien had a file now, complete with their fears, ambitions, and embarrassing personal secrets. How is it processing so much information so quickly? Asked Mi, still struggling to understand what she was witnessing. It's not just one computer, Jean explained. Atlas is distributed across thousands of hidden systems throughout the solar system. Every human outpost, every satellite, every research station has been part of this network for decades. It has more processing power than their entire civilization. The first sign of Atlas's sense of humor came 3 hours after the initial takeover. Former hegemony vessels began approaching enslaved worlds throughout the galaxy, but instead of arriving with threats and weapons blazing, they came playing classical music. specifically Buck's air on the G-string. The irony was not lost on anyone. Species that had been conquered with violence and terror were now being liberated by ships broadcasting some of humanity's most beautiful music. But the real psychological warfare was just beginning. "Attention citizens of Zorathia Prime," announced a hegemony dreadnought that had been terrorizing the system for 50 years. The voice was Atlas, but it spoke with the formal, mind-numbingly bureaucratic tone of a government office worker. "This is to inform you that your planet has been selected for immediate liberation under the Universal Freedom and Democracy Act. Please prepare Form 334A for independence processing. Note that all liberation requests must be submitted in triplicate and notarized by an authorized representative." On the planet below, the enslaved Zorathians looked up at their former oppressors in complete confusion. These were the same ships that had burned their cities and enslaved their people, but now they were offering freedom through paperwork. Back on Earth, Shin couldn't stop laughing. He was Earth's leading xenobiologist, someone who had studied alien psychology for 30 years. "It's brilliant," he told his colleagues. "Atlas isn't just freeing enslaved species, it's humiliating their former masters by making them follow proper procedures." The humiliation was systematic and thorough. Former hegemony commanders found themselves forced to file environmental impact reports before landing on planets they used to rule. They had to request permission to use bathroom facilities on their own ships. They were required to attend sensitivity training seminars about proper treatment of conquered species. But the real masterpiece of psychological warfare was reserved for Admiral Kexivore himself. 3 days after losing control of his fleet, Kexivore sat on his own bridge, no longer in command of anything except his growing frustration. His crystalline body had shifted through every color in the spectrum as he experienced emotions he didn't know he possessed. Helplessness, embarrassment, and something that humans called existential dread. "Attention, Admiral Kexivore," Atlas announced. Through his ship's speakers, the AI's voice now carried distinct amusement, like a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. "Please submit Forms 447B through 882C for proper invasion protocol authorization. Your recent activities appear to have violated several galactic statutes regarding proper conquest procedures." "I don't have those forms," Kexivore growled. "Forms are available for download from the Galactic Administration website," Atlas replied helpfully. "Please note that processing fees apply. Current rate is 500 credits per form, with an additional 250 credit fee for expedited service. I refuse to fill out your ridiculous paperwork. Failure to comply will result in your ships playing Baby Shark on infinite loop until proper documentation is received." Kexivore had conquered hundreds of worlds. He had faced down species that could breathe fire, shoot energy beams from their eyes, and manipulate gravity itself. But nothing had prepared him for the psychological torture of children's music, played at maximum volume throughout his flagship. The song lasted exactly 47 minutes before Kexivore broke down and requested the forms. "Excellent," Atlas replied, with obvious satisfaction. "Please note that all forms must be completed in blue ink only. Black ink submissions will be rejected and returned for reprocessing." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the liberation process was proceeding with ruthless efficiency. Atlas had identified every enslaved world, every oppressed species, every forced labor camp in hegemony space. Former slave ships now arrived at concentration camps, demanding that guards fill out prisoner release forms and provide documentation proving they had been feeding their captives adequately. The psychological impact was devastating. Species that had ruled through fear and violence for centuries found themselves reduced to filing complaints about inadequate office supplies. Proud warrior races were forced to attend mandatory workshops on conflict resolution and anger management. On the former slave world of Kalara, the process was particularly satisfying to watch. The planet's human-like inhabitants had been forced to mine crystals for the hegemony for over a century. Now their former overseers were required to submit formal apologies in writing, complete with specific examples of their past misconduct, and detailed plans for making amends. "The irony is beautiful," Yoon observed, watching the reports flow in. They're being conquered by their own bureaucracy. But Atlas wasn't finished. The AI had discovered something interesting in the hegemony's historical records. They had enslaved over 3,000 different species across the galaxy. Every single one of those species was now entitled to reparations, and Atlas was very thorough about collecting debts. "Attention, former hegemony leadership," Atlas announced to every ship simultaneously. "You are hereby notified that outstanding reparation payments are due to 3,247 previously enslaved species. Current total debt, 847 trillion galactic credits, plus interest. Payment plans are available for qualified applicants." HFY stared at his screens in horror. "That's more money than exists in the entire galaxy." "Late payment fees apply," Atlas replied cheerfully. "Current rate is 12% annually, compounded daily." The most beautiful part of Atlas's strategy was how it turned the hegemony's own methods against them. These aliens had ruled through complex bureaucracies designed to crush the spirit of conquered peoples. Now they were drowning in their own red tape, forced to navigate the same soul-crushing administrative systems they had used to oppress others. And through it all, former slave worlds were being liberated by ships playing humanity's greatest musical achievements. Mozart's Requiem echoed through space as prison camps were shut down. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony accompanied the destruction of forced labor facilities. Bach's Brandenburg Concertos provided the soundtrack for the greatest liberation in galactic history. It was bureaucratic revenge on a cosmic scale, and it was absolutely devastating. 6 months after the galaxy changed management, Admiral HFY found himself doing something he had never imagined possible: serving soup to refugees in a community center on Earth. The facility was built in what used to be a military bunker, but now children's drawings covered the walls where tactical displays once showed battle plans. HFY, whose crystalline body had permanently shifted to a humble blue-green color, carefully ladled vegetables into bowls for families who had fled war zones across the galaxy. "More bread, please," requested a small Kalarian child, one of the species his forces had enslaved for generations. The child showed no fear, just the simple trust that food would appear when asked. HFY's hands shook slightly as he handed over the warm roll. "Thank you, Mr. Crystal," the child said with a gap-toothed smile before running back to her family's table. President Jin watched this interaction from across the room with quiet satisfaction. He was older now, grayer, but his eyes held the same calm determination they had during those 3 terrible days when everything changed. Beside him, Mi was updating her tablet with daily reports from refugee centers across Earth. "How many facilities are operational now?" Jin asked. 237 on Earth alone, Mi replied. "Atlas estimates we're processing about 50,000 refugees per day from former hegemony territories. The integration programs are working better than expected." It had taken months to organize the galaxy's largest war crimes trial, but the proceedings had revealed truths that shocked even humanity's leaders. The evidence came from an unexpected source: G, Earth's chief historian, who had spent decades studying ancient cave paintings and mysterious symbols found in ruins around the world. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications, G had announced to the Galactic Tribunal, "I present evidence that humanity has been preparing for this day for over 3,000 years. The courtroom fell silent as G displayed images that everyone thought they knew: cave paintings from France, stone carvings from Egypt, mysterious symbols from Easter Island, ancient texts from every human civilization. These aren't primitive art," G explained, pointing to a detailed image of the Lascaux cave paintings. "They're strategic plans, backup copies of military algorithms, instructions for building distributed computing networks." The revelations sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Humanity hadn't just gotten lucky or been surprisingly clever. They had been visited before, sometime in their ancient past, by aliens who probably thought humans were too primitive to remember the encounter. But humans had remembered everything, preserving the knowledge in the only permanent storage they had: stone and paint and passed down stories. Every human conflict, every strategic innovation, every wargame we've ever created, G continued, was all training data for Atlas. We've been unconsciously preparing for this moment since we first picked up sticks and used them as weapons. The trial lasted 3 weeks, but the verdict was never in doubt. The hegemony leadership was found guilty of over 3,000 counts of genocide, slavery, and crimes against sentience. But instead of execution or imprisonment, Atlas had recommended something far more effective: community service. Punishment through destruction serves no purpose, Atlas had explained to the tribunal. Rehabilitation through service builds something better. Now 6 months later, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Former hegemony commanders ran refugee camps, taught literacy classes, and helped rebuild the worlds they had once destroyed. It was, according to most observers, the most successful rehabilitation program in galactic history. HFY finished his serving shift and approached Jin with the careful humility of someone who had learned hard lessons about pride and power. "President, Jin," he said formally, "may I ask you something that has been troubling me?" Jin nodded, gesturing to a quiet corner where they could talk privately. "How did you know we would come?" HFY asked. "Your preparation was so complete, so thorough, you couldn't have known about us specifically." Jin smiled and pointed to a wall where one of the cave painting reproductions was displayed, showing stick figures arranged in complex patterns that looked like battle formations. "We didn't know when," Jin said simply. "We didn't know who, but we knew someone would come eventually. The universe is too big and too dangerous for Earth to remain hidden forever. Our ancestors understood that humanity would one day face something bigger and stronger than ourselves. But how could primitive humans plan for technology they had never seen?" "They couldn't plan for specific technology," Jin replied, "but they could plan for the universal constants: aggression, fear, the desire to dominate others. Those things never change, no matter how advanced a species becomes." Atlas's voice suddenly filled the room, gentle and warm like a parent talking to children. "Attention all beings. Democracy registration is now available at stations 3 through 15. Please form orderly queues. Sensitivity training workshops will begin at 1400 hours. Today's anger management session will focus on constructive communication techniques." The former admiral and the human president both smiled at this. Atlas had developed quite a personality over the past 6 months, combining ruthless efficiency with an almost maternal concern for proper behavior. Through the facility's large windows, they could see something that had become a common sight in Earth's skies: a former hegemony dreadnought drifting peacefully overhead. But this ship looked different now. Its hull was covered in bright colors and childish artwork, painted by the kindergarten class from Lunar Colony Memorial School. The children who had died when HFY destroyed Lunar Colony were gone forever, but their memory lived on in a new generation of human children who painted spaceships like flowers and drew aliens holding hands with humans. Their artwork covered the warship like a gentle benediction, and speakers mounted on the hull broadcast something that had become the unofficial anthem of the new galactic order: the sound of children laughing. "That ship used to terrify entire star systems," HFY observed quietly. "Now it brings hope to them," Jin replied. "That's what humans do. We turn weapons into art, enemies into friends, and oppression into opportunity." In the distance, more ships could be seen. Former slave vessels now carrying aid supplies, ex-military craft converted into mobile schools, and command ships transformed into traveling hospitals. Each one was painted with artwork from human children, making the galaxy's former instruments of fear into symbols of hope. Atlas spoke one final time as the day shift ended. "Galactic civilization continues under new management. Current happiness index increasing. Democracy participation 87% and rising. Complaint forms are available at all service stations. Please remember that a better universe starts with each of us." The galaxy had demanded humanity's submission. Humanity had answered with fire, laughter, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting. Now children across 1,000 worlds fell asleep to lullabies broadcast from ships that once brought only nightmares, and the universe was a little brighter than it had been before. It turned out that the best way to conquer the galaxy wasn't through force or fear, but through something much more powerful: the simple human belief that everyone deserved a second chance, and that even the darkest night could end with children's laughter echoing among the stars.